My son and his wife spent 18 months draining my bakery, forging my signature, and building a court case to have me declared incompetent. Everyone told me to confront him, cut him off, fight loud, make it public, but I said nothing. I smiled at Sunday dinners. I let Sasha slide papers in front of me. I signed nothing that mattered. They celebrated for 2 weeks after filing the petition until the morning Francis stood up in that courtroom and pressed play on a recording. My name is Eleanor. I'm 65 years old. And I want to tell you what happened to my bakery and to my family and what I did about it. You need to know about Eleanor's table before any of the rest of this makes sense. Leonard died on a Thursday. Heart attack, no warning. The Tuesday before, he'd been at the kitchen table helping Derek with a science project, volcanoes, baking soda, and vinegar. And I remember that smell, that sharp vinegar smell, because for a long time after I couldn't open a bottle without having to set it down. 2 days later, he was gone. I was 34, Derek was 12. The savings account had $4,200 in it. I stared at that number long enough that it stopped looking like money and started looking like a math problem I had to solve. I had always baked. Leonard used to say I found comfort in flour the way other people found it in scripture. After he died, I did both. I sold cakes from the house, first then to a diner on Broad Street, then to a wedding venue out on Route 11, whose manager took a chance on me because she told me later I looked like I needed someone to. I think she was right. Derek started high school. I leased a small storefront on Green. By the time he walked across the stage in Chapel Hill, and I sat in the bleachers crying behind my sunglasses, Eleanor's table had 12 employees and a reputation that stretched across 3 counties. I did that alone. Not alone the way people say it to be dramatic. Alone. No second income. No one to call when the walk-in cooler broke at 11 o'clock at night. Quiet weekends, no vacations, years of putting every dollar back into the business or into Derek's education. I didn't mind most of it. The work felt like proof of something. I was never quite sure what exactly, and I tended to it. Like it mattered because it did. When Derek took a job in Atlanta after college, I cried in the car on the drive home. Happy tears. We had made it through. He came back to town 4 years ago, and he brought Sasha with him. Well, she was lovely. I want to be honest about that because it matters to the rest of the story. Dark hair, wide smile, the kind of woman who touches your arm when she talks to you so you feel like the only person in the room. She called me Mom the second week she knew me. Said it so easily, like it had always been true. I remember thinking, he finally found someone who fits. I liked her. For a while, I genuinely liked her. They married within 6 months of moving back, quiet ceremony, just family. By the following spring, Sasha had drifted into what she called an advisory role at the bakery, and Derek was spending more time there too, transitioning away from corporate work, the way he put it. Around that same time, I had a minor stroke. My neurologist called it a warning shot. I recovered fully by every measure he had, but it had shaken me in a way I hadn't expected. The people around me started saying words like transition, future planning, letting the next generation carry some of the weight. I heard it enough times that I started to believe it was my own idea. So I let them in, and that was the opening they needed. The first crack showed in October. I'd worked with Bob Green at Green Family Supply for 11 years. We had an arrangement that went past whatever was written in the contract. I referred him to every event planner. I knew he held my holiday inventory without charging me for storage. That kind of relationship takes years to build and isn't replaceable. I called to sort out the Christmas order. He was stiff on the phone in a way I hadn't heard from him before. Eleanor, he said, finally, I thought you all had moved on. I asked what he meant. He said Derek had called him personally 3 months earlier to end the account. I hadn't known. No one had asked me. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table with my hands flat on the wood and stayed very still for a moment. Then I pulled up the business account online. I was still a co-owner, technically, and started going back through 3 months of transactions. My hands went cold. Payments to vendors I'd never approved. A monthly consulting fee to something called Solis Group LLC. Equipment lease adjustments that made no sense for our size of operation, and attached to several of them, authorization forms with my name on them, my signature, on papers I had never touched. I didn't call Derek. Something in my chest, 30 years of running a business, does something to your instincts. Said, wait, watch. Understand the full shape of this before you make a single sound. That same week, Priya came for her monthly visit. She'd been checking on me since the stroke. Young woman efficient, always had her notepad. She was heading out when she stopped at the door and turned back. There was something on her face that took me a moment to place. She said she wasn't sure she should tell me this, but someone had called her agency the month before, asking whether any of her visit notes mentioned memory problems or confusion. I asked who called. She said it was a woman who identified herself as my daughter-in-law. I thanked her, closed the door, stood in the hallway for a while, looking at the photographs on the wall. Derek at 12 with a sunburn and a gap-toothed smile. Derek at his graduation. Derek and Sasha on their wedding day, his arm around her, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. I had always liked that photo. That afternoon, looking at it, felt different. I thought about what kind of person goes hunting for cognitive decline paperwork on a woman who's already been cleared. I thought about what that paperwork would be useful for, and then the whole shape of it settled into place all at once, like a key turning. The next morning I called Frances Okafor. She'd handled my original business incorporation back when Eleanor's Table was a storefront with 2 employees and more hope than cash flow. I hadn't needed her in years. I sat down at my kitchen table and told her everything straight through. She listened without interrupting until I finished. Then she said, Eleanor, what you're describing is the groundwork for a conservatorship petition. They file with the court claiming you can't manage your own affairs, financial, medical, everything. If the judge grants it, they have legal control over your assets and your business. The stroke history makes it easier for them. Any documentation of cognitive decline, even mild, even disputed, goes into evidence. I asked how much time we had. She said she didn't know. She said we had to move carefully and fast. Frances put me in touch with a forensic accountant named Harold Briggs. Small man, always in a bow tie, spoke in careful, full sentences like he was building something permanent with every word. He went through everything I'd gathered, the altered contracts, the Solis Group payments, the forged signatures, and within a week had traced Solis Group LLC to a shell company registered in Sasha's maiden name, filed 6 months after the wedding. The total drained into that account over 18 months, just under $140,000. My money? Eleanor's table money. Then Harold found something else. Sasha had been married twice before Derek. Her first husband, Arthur Moss, a retired pharmacist in his late 70s, had died 4 years ago, 14 months into their marriage, and left his estate to her. His adult children had contested the will, alleged undue influence, and the case settled quietly out of court. Her second marriage ended in divorce. The ex-husband was now in another state and not reachable. I sat in Harold's office looking at the papers spread across his desk, and I felt something go very still inside me. She had done this before. She had found a grieving son, someone who missed his father, who wanted a family, who may be trusted too easily. and she had walked the same path she already knew, the warm smile, the easy mom. And once she understood what I had the quiet, patient work of taking it. The question I still couldn't answer was Derek. Did he know? Was he part of it? Or had she been working him the same way she worked me? I needed to find out before I did anything else. I am not proud of what I did next. I began to perform. At a family dinner one Sunday, I asked twice whether Sasha's sister was still living in Savannah. Once naturally, then again, a few minutes later, like I'd forgotten. I watched Derek and Sasha look at each other across the table, just a flicker, half a second, but I caught it and filed it away. I let Sasha bring papers to the table without reading them aloud the way I always had. I'd squint and say, "Oh, I trust you, sweetheart. Where do I sign?" But the pen I used was different from the one I always signed with, and I never pressed hard enough to leave a clean impression. Francis had told me exactly what would and wouldn't constitute a valid authorization under Georgia law. I paid attention. What I was really doing during those weeks was watching Derek's face, measuring how much he knew. I got my answer on a Sunday afternoon in November. I arrived at the bakery early, no particular reason, just habit, and heard voices at my office. My office with Leonard's photograph on the wall and the framed review from the Macon Telegraph I'd put up the week we got it. I stopped just outside the open door. Sasha was speaking fast and low. She said the timeline had to move up, that the conservatorship petition was ready, that once it was filed, the court would appoint a guardian and Eleanor would have no choice. Derek said, "But she's not actually impaired." What if the judge sees that Sasha said, "By the time we're done documenting, she will be"? Silence. Derek, "I don't know about this." And then Sasha said his name, just Derek, flat and quiet, the way you say something when you want someone to stop thinking and start agreeing. "Think about what this business is worth. Think about what we could do with it. You deserve this. It was always going to come to you anyway. We're just moving the timeline." Another silence. Longer. Derek said, "Okay," but carefully. I walked back to my car, sat in the parking lot. The sun was low winter light, and the parking lot was mostly empty, a Tuesday, I think. And I stayed in that car for 20 minutes while the engine ticked. I cried, not because I was falling apart, but because I had still been holding onto the possibility somewhere underneath everything I already knew that my son had been kept in the dark, that I was only fighting Sasha. I wasn't. I gave myself those 20 minutes. Then I called Frances and told her it was time. The conservatorship petition was filed on a Tuesday 2 weeks before the hearing. Stroke history documentation for key episodes of confusion from a doctor neither Francis nor I could identify, and a sworn statement from Derek saying he had personally watched his mother sign documents she later claimed not to remember. What they didn't know, Francis had filed a counter-petition the day before theirs. Harold had spent 3 weeks assembling a forensic financial report, every unauthorized transfer, every shell company payment, every forged signature, all of it documented and sourced. Priya had agreed to submit her own sworn statement describing who had called her agency and what exactly they'd asked for. And I had the recording. Legal in Georgia, one-party consent. Sasha's voice clear as anything. "By the time we're done documenting, she will be." The courtroom was quiet. These hearings usually are. Judge Dale Weston at the bench. 2 tables. Their attorney went first smooth, practiced a careful sympathy in his voice as he laid out the story of a devoted son and daughter-in-law worried about a mother who wasn't quite herself anymore. Then Frances stood up. She didn't raise her voice once. She laid the evidence out in order the way you set up a kitchen before a long bake, methodical, nothing wasted. The shell company, the $140,000, the forged authorizations, Arthur Moss, the pharmacist, the recording. I watched Sasha's face. She'd been composed through most of it. Then her own voice came through the speaker, and every bit of color left her face. She looked very briefly like someone who had run a long con and just now understood that the other person had been running one back. Derek stared at the table, didn't look at his lawyer, didn't look at Sasha, just sat there, very still, watching something he couldn't stop. Judge Weston denied the petition. He referred the fraud evidence to the district attorney's office and issued a restraining order barring both Derek and Sasha from Eleanor's table and its accounts pending investigation. We were in the hallway when Derek caught up to me. I could hear Sasha's heels already ahead of us, sharp, quick fading. "Mom," his voice cracked on the word. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't." She said it was protecting the business, protecting you, that you'd want. I stopped, turned around. He was 51 years old, and he looked like that 12-year-old at the kitchen table the night before his father's funeral, asking me if everything was going to be okay. I said, "I don't know yet what forgiveness looks like between us, but it doesn't look like silence, and it doesn't look like pretending. If you want a relationship with me, Derek, it starts with the truth, all of it. And that means cooperating fully with the investigators. Everything." He nodded. He was crying. I didn't hold him. But I stood there with him in that courthouse hallway for a moment, in the particular quiet of something broken that doesn't yet know if it can be repaired. Sasha was indicted 4 months later. Wire fraud, elder financial exploitation forgery. The Arthur Moss estate was reopened. The case is still moving through the courts, but Harold tells me the financial picture is comprehensive. Derek cooperated fully. He returned his access to the business, submitted to a complete financial audit, and has spent the better part of a year doing the hard, unglamorous work of understanding how he let himself be led somewhere he never should have gone. We talk on the phone now, carefully. The ground between us is still unsteady, and I don't know yet what it becomes. I'm not in a rush to decide. Eleanor's table is still standing. My 12 employees still have their jobs. Bob Green picked up the phone the day after the hearing, and we talked for an hour like the last few months hadn't happened. The Christmas orders came in. I filled every one of them. I moved the Macon Telegraph Review to the wall by the window where the morning light hits it first. I wanted to see it when I came in each day. I also started a small fund through the county's legal aid office, voluntary contributions from local businesses to help older residents get legal representation when someone comes for their assets or their independence. I named it after Leonard because he was the one who first taught me that protecting people isn't just about how much you love them. It's about what you're willing to do. Some evenings I stay after everyone else has gone home. The kitchen gets quiet in a particular way, refrigerators humming the streetlight coming through the back window, and it reminds me of those early years when Derek was small and the fear of losing everything felt very close. I can still feel the weight of those years, the exhaustion, the stubbornness, the absolute refusal to stop. That stubbornness didn't go anywhere. It just got quieter, surer of itself. It had enough years behind it by now that it didn't need to announce itself anymore. So, I am 65 years old. I'm still here, still covered in flour on Tuesday mornings, still watching the light move across the kitchen I've known for 30 years. They thought my age made me soft. They thought my love for my son was the same thing as blindness. They were wrong. The most dangerous person in any room isn't the one making the most noise. It's the one who has already decided quietly that she is not going to lose. That was me. If any part of this sounds familiar to you, someone pushing papers in front of you, making gentle suggestions about the future, asking you to trust them on things you don't fully understand, pay attention. Get your own attorney, not theirs, yours. And don't sign a single thing until you've read every word. You have not come this far to hand it to someone else.